In this episode of Leading Out Loud, we unpack one of the most misunderstood dynamics in leadership: how to navigate tension, communication, and tough people decisions without losing trust. I'm joined by HR executive Artie Odoms to explore what leadership really requires today, balancing results with humanity, leading with transparency, and creating environments where people feel heard and valued. If you're looking to lead with more clarity, confidence, and impact, then this episode is for you. So let's dive in. All right. Well, I'm really excited about today's topic, which is how to effectively retaliate as a leader. Okay, number one, if y'all turned up the volume, you're toxic and you're into the drama. So I am joking, please. We're not talking about that. You should not want to retaliate as a leader. That's a no-no. I was just testing out this thing like rage bait, whatever. Artie was cool enough to go along with it. But I want to introduce Artie Odoms with us. I'm going to have him talk a little bit about his background just to catch everyone up. But if you aren't sure, we're really going to be focused on the people side of human resources business and cover some topics that we've encountered time and time again as leaders. So Artie, number one, thank you for joining me today.
Yes,
It's been a minute and
absolutely.
it's always such a pleasure talking to you. But for any listener that may not be familiar with your background, can you walk us through your career journey and how you found your way into HR and workplace strategy?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Bridget. It's always good to see you and happy to be here and excited to get into this with everyone and a little bit about myself. So, funny enough, I cut my teeth in talent acquisition on the agency side. And I was there for a couple of years, and then my employer at the time relocated me to Houston, which is great. I spent a few more years in TA. The firm that I was with was purchased, and they were making a lot of changes, and so I saw an opportunity to exit and kind of figure out what was next to me. But in the back of my mind, I always wanted to get more into an HR business partner role on the corporate side. So I started interviewing for roles and I ended up with two offers. One was back in a traditional TA sense. One was a consulting role as an HRBP. And to top it off, my wife was 8 months pregnant at the time, right?
Mhm.
So making all kinds of crazy life decisions and being as supportive as she is, she's like, look, go for the consulting gig, get the experience you're looking for. So I jumped into a business partner role. And it was such a blessing because it ended up turning into a 10-year deal, converted full time. And I was with that organization again for almost 10 years. And that's where I started my journey in terms of like being in a business partner function. And so I was there for a good 10 years. I made the jump into the vet industry where you and I connected right at the start of the pandemic, which was insane. But we did some amazing work together and was able to increase my skill set there for a couple of years. And then as I was looking for my next move and talking to a mentor of mine, she said, hey, you need to get some global experience. It's really going to set you apart and up your game. And it's going to stretch you and make you a bit more uncomfortable. But on the back end, it's really going to serve you well. And so I jumped back into technology with a global company, which was fantastic. I was there for a handful of years and stepped up my game into a larger organization, which where I am now, oversee a large part of our division with offices in 32 countries and have the proper HR support in each of those geos. And so very excited to be doing that. I will be completing a year this month that I've been there. It's been very exciting. The culture is pretty dynamic. The leadership is fantastic. And so, yeah, it's been a exciting ride.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Just with respect to my experience with you when we had the pleasure of working together, what I really appreciate about just you as a human being, your personality, is you're so easy to work with. And in my own experience throughout the years, even as a really young novice manager and all the way through, I feel like leaders are sometimes kind of scared of HR. Like
Yeah,
they don't want to involve HR. It's like you're
right.
the morality police or something. And what I find endearing, at least with your partnership way back in the day, was it was so easy and it made
Thank you.
sense. And we really navigated sometimes some really difficult situations, sometimes some really funny ones that I can't
Right.
believe somebody did what they did. But it's really nice to have that business partner that is very much a subject matter expert on all things human resources, which as operators, as leaders, there is no way for us to know all of the things
Right.
we need to know. So I was
Absolutely.
excited to have you today.
Well, thank you, thank you. And there is around traditional HR, there is this stigma, right? People joke and say HR means, human roadblock, right? And so certainly early in my career, it felt like I was more of a warden than a business partner, and that was just how things were ran at that time. And as we've evolved, as companies evolved. And really trying to understand what's important to people, our roles have had to evolve also to provide more of a measured, balanced, and approach to how do we manage the people and manage the business, in tandem. Sometimes can be tough. There's a bit of a struggle there sometimes, a bit of a seesaw. But well, like a part of my job, one of the biggest things is be able to coach, through some of that with leaders, whether they're first time novice leaders or 20 years into the business, there's still something to pick up and learn. And that's where I get to step in and really just try to provide that support that I think is going to help them manage their team more effectively.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of seeing how organizations are changing their approach with respect to HR and talent management. Can you articulate a little more, maybe specifically, what is different today than, 10, 15 years ago?
Absolutely. I mean, companies have to, right? When your
Mhm.
workforce is people, you have to evolve.
Yeah.
And not just by the different generations like Gen Z and Gen X and your boomers. Yes, you will have that. But when you think about what a company needs to accomplish, if they're just so focused on results, you're going to lose your people. And if
Yeah.
your people aren't there, you're not going to get your results. Right? If you're so focused on your people, and while everybody may be happy, you're not going to hit your results. There is a balance there. And I think that's been more dynamic in our role is looking at the data that supports it. When can we be more people focused? When do we have to be more business focused there? Where can we be measured, right? And I would say, a really good leader is going to have the forethought to forecast that so they can keep a balanced approach. So when things are maybe seesawing because we've been able to forecast and measure that, right, we can keep our ship steady. And that's one of the biggest things that I've seen over the last 15 years is how we take that measured approach using data to tell us the story. We have to be able to listen to the story. Even if we don't like what it's telling us, it doesn't matter. We
Yeah.
have to be ready to react to it and respond to it effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense. Artie, from your perspective, what separates organizations that truly invest in their people from those that simply say that they do?
Yeah. The easiest answer and probably a silly one is that you have to do it. And it's one thing to say, it's another thing to do. And you'll find most organizations, they do more than they say, and people tend to appreciate that. It's kind of like the best kept little secret,
Mhm.
right? Which is fun. And you see that. And it's just not a common faux pas that I hear is, gosh, what if I invest all this money and then they leave? I'm like, well, what if you don't and they leave anyway? And so where's the greater risk and where do you want to have that measured approach to keep investing in you? You invest into me, I'm going to invest into you.
Sure.
There's a greater likelihood of me staying because my company chooses to invest in me, my leader chooses to invest in me. So I would just continue to encourage that even through tougher years, right? Fiscal years, those
Mhm.
are going to happen. Again, if you can forecast and have a measured approach to it, you can still have some level of investment into your employees that's going to have them be more dedicated to your organization. So quite frankly, you just have to do it. You have
Yeah.
to plan for it, invest into it. You have to communicate it early and often. And that could be a turning point for somebody choosing to stay or choosing to leave within your company.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember it was many years ago, like 2009.
Gosh, wow.
I was just 18 at the time, but we were in a recession, and the organization I was a part of, and I was a leader, we could not provide cost of living
Mm,
raises to our staff. And as a leader, it's really scary to not be able to do that. But
right,
on the flip side, it's like we're so grateful that we still have jobs right now. And so
right.
what I chose to do is number one, I went around to every person that reported to me and I talked with them. I kind of
Absolutely.
explained, like, listen, this is in no way a reflection of you or the
Right.
value that we have of you and what you do here, but really it's the economy, the market, what we're trying to navigate with respect to just the business. But
Absolutely.
instead, I offered all I could, which was myself, and
Right.
essentially said, how can I support you? How can I mentor you? Is there something you want to work on? Is there a skill? Is there a goal? I can at least give you that, right? It's my
Absolutely.
time, but it is free, essentially. And
Yes.
honestly, we didn't lose anybody during that
Mhm.
period. And I felt like people did appreciate it by having that direct conversation and saying, like, okay, like we get it. If they could give us pay increases, they would. But again,
Right.
we're going to be grateful we have jobs right now.
Absolutely. And if I could add to that, right,
Yeah.
I'll say this very directly is like, do not insult your employees' intelligence.
Yeah.
Taking the time to be able to speak to them and communicate to them and be transparent with them where you can. There are some things that are out of our control, and we're in this ship together. This is what I can control. I can give you more, a little bit more of me, right? And that goes a long way for people. They really don't understand, showing a little bit of authenticity and you mix that with some vulnerability, right? People thought, wow, Artie's human. He's just not the
Mhm.
HR guy
Yeah.
who's a chatbot, right? He's actually a human being who are going through the same impacts that they would be going. I'm just the one who's communicating it. But yes, it impacts me also. But I also have to communicate it because it's part of my role.
Yeah.
So, I would tell folks, don't insult your people's intelligence, be honest with them, give them that because yes, they're gonna feel like we're in this together. And yes, we're gonna weather the storm. And yes, we're thankful to have our jobs. And what I tell folks in those moments, right, it separates leaders from really good leaders. And it's an opportunity to upskill yourself. It's an opportunity to invest in a piece of yourself that you hadn't been done before. So
Sure.
on the back end of that, you're better for it, for
Mhm.
yourself personally, because I'm a big fan as you own your own career. So take the time to invest in yourself and take advantage. If someone's willing to give you their time, right, as a leader or as a mentor, take full advantage of that because that's going to pay off dividends in the future. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Artie, I want to talk a little bit about clarity in job roles and expectations
Yeah,
because I think we often find that area very murky. So,
always.
why do you think so many organizations struggle to define
Hmm.
roles well from the start?
Yeah. So from the business side of it, Bridget, I'll say it this way. It's oftentimes their objectives companies are trying to meet. And at times we're literally building the plane as we're flying it, right? So we're trying to get close enough to say that this is what we need. And then we have to further define it as someone gets in. So sometimes it's murky, not on purpose, but that's just kind of the game that we're playing in right now. So when I notice that, and I'll give you an example if I may, what I tell leaders is set the context with the candidate. Look, it's murky. We were 70% defined. The 30% is what we have to figure out. Can we do this together? Sometimes they're nervous to be that transparent because they don't want to lose the candidate. But then
Mhm.
if you get them in here and now they're your employee and they felt like you weren't completely honest with them, again, you're insulting their intelligence. They're going to be upset, and you may get a year or two out of them, and then they're going to move on to something else, right? And the example I give is where I am now. Well, we were putting together one of our teams from scratch, and so we're creating a different line of business. We had our GM and we basically were looking at expectations of each role and how we're going to
Mhm.
bring it together. I was really excited about that piece of work because not only did we put the team together in a year, we also met our budget commitments. So that was really, really exciting. But every time we were in an interview or a town hall, I was very clear with the leaders. Look, this is where we are today. This is current state, future state. Here's where it's gray. Here's where it's black and white. Talk to me about that. How can we build this together? And they got excited, right? This is what I can do. This is who I know. And so it came together so eloquently and beautifully. It was exciting to see that come together. And
Mhm.
so we've done an amazing amount of work that plane is pretty much humming on its own. And now we're looking at just focusing on the business and how we meet our fiscal objectives. So we have to just be more upfront with that because the stress is there, the presses are there from board and whatnot to meet objectives, and so yeah, it's going to be a little murky because we're trying to build it at 90 miles an hour, and while we're steering it, and so we just got to be clear from the start. This is where we are. This is where we want to be. How can we get there together? And Again, people will feel empowered and that they're going to actually own a piece of it. And they're probably going to do more for you than if you tried to not tell them until after the fact. They're going to feel a little betrayed. And that's where the frustration sets in for folks. And so I would just encourage leaders to be more transparent from the start if they're not already.
I also feel like, to some degree, not all, but some organizations or leaders maybe don't know what they don't know. So they
Yeah.
maybe don't even recognize the value. It makes me think about client that I worked with on the consulting side of things. And the nice thing about that is because now that I'm, at the table as a quote
Mhm.
unquote expert, I can be very transparent. And so what I remember this group saying was they were about 12 years old, okay? But they would refer to themselves as a startup.
Got it.
And their excuse for a lack of processes, a lack of all of the foundational components, the build as you go that people often say, is because they were a startup. And I said, no, you're not. I said,
Mhm.
you are 12 years old. You are an adolescent about to hit puberty. Shit is about to get real.
Right.
Like that maybe year one, year two, yes, you're a startup and you don't have your
Right.
shit together, and that's okay. But no, you are 12. You need to get your shit together. And it's almost like, is there a playbook? Can we create a playbook? Because some of these things, just like job descriptions, pay band,
Right.
it feels so common knowledge, but yet how many times have we been part of developing that for organizations because it didn't
Absolutely.
exist?
Right. No, that's super solid. And on the people side, yes, we can have the pay bands and have the job descriptions. And also on the business side, sometimes what you see, there's going to be some nuance in the role, right? So when I think murky, that's more where I lean. Or sometimes we get a curveball and we have to manage it. But yes, there is some operational maturity that I would say is on the leader, or potentially the business, that
Yeah.
we have to work through together. And in this case, like the company I'm at now, that maturity, I would say, is holistically there. Now, when you bring up a whole line of business, then you're kind of in startup mode because you're building out a new line of business. You have to manage through what that looks like and how you communicate it. Then it folds into the greater organization, and that maturity is expected to come fast and grow. So I just go back to the transparency of this is where we are today. This is where we need to be. I think on the operational side, we got to be transparent about it. And on the people side, you have to be open to receiving it and then also expressing how that fits into the greater org.
Yeah. I apologize. I feel like I'm pivoting a lot on you. You have such a depth and breadth of knowledge that I kind of want to hit some of the key areas that I hear a lot of people talking about.
Let's do it.
So the next thing I just want to hit with you here is employee engagement. I feel like finally leaders are focused on that and understand the value in having an engaged workforce. Perhaps they
Right.
don't know how, but at least there's a curiosity around how do we find that out. In your experience, what actually drives engagement beyond surface level perks?
Absolutely. Great question. And you can do all the engagement surveys you want and read the data, which is good. You have to action on it, right? It's you said, we did. You got to be clear on that. And to me, that's still surface level because yes, you can put programs into place and
Sure.
some new processes, and that's going to help clean up some of the gray, which we appreciate and we definitely need. And a big part of engagement for me is how we communicate. And it's just not from an immediate leader. It's from the top. One thing that I've said many times is in organizations, you've got your C-suite and then you have like your workforce. And sometimes we get a gap that happens in there, right? How do we minimize that gap, right? How do we get it closer to where there's more engagement from your C-suite or senior leader to your frontline workers? To me, that's where you really see the meat of it. And a couple things that I've suggested, if I may, is right, I've seen leaders do skip levels, which is great, but even taking it a step further is have CEO roundtables. You get folks at the table, 15, 20 people, a mini town hall with a senior leader at all levels. And that really gives an opportunity for that junior level role to get exposure to a more senior leader and hear directly from that leader on current state versus future state of the organization. And that helps to drive engagement and I will tell people, get your biggest naysayers, because if you can convince that naysayer,
Yeah.
then guess what? They're going to go advocate for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. So you really want to have a good mix of people to really drive that engagement. And you have to allow people to live within their values. Now, where I'm at today, one of the things I'm most impressed with is that we're a really large organization and we have offices in India, South America, in Ireland, and I've been able to fly out to these places and we live within the values of our organization and we do it in the culture of that country. And to me, that's pretty dynamic, right? So no matter what country you're in, you get to live the values of that organization in your culture. And that's pretty exciting because companies can sometimes struggle with that because they kind of want this cookie cutter mindset. And that's not where this is at. And this is why you have people who've been with this company 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and decades. And when I ask them about it, it's about the culture and how they can live through the company's values through their own culture. So I can't stress that enough. And it goes back to how we communicate with our resources, where we choose to invest in our employees, whether it be in a people, a process, or a technology, and then how we drive that forward together.
Artie, what is one workplace myth you wish leaders would stop believing about managing
Mm,
people?
yes. So I love this question. And let me tell you why, is you can't manage your team the same way.
Mhm.
So if your span of control is three directs, five directs, eight directs, you cannot manage them each the same way because it's easiest for that manager. So you have to think about what's important to each of your direct reports, how they like to be communicated to, how they like to be managed, right? How they like to receive direction and manage to that. Yes, you feel a little crazy at times and maybe a little dizzy in the head, but to really make you an evolved leader, and expand and stretch you as a leader, that's your approach I believe you need to take with your direct reports. And the conversation is not a one-way street. Just because I'm the manager doesn't mean that I can't ask for feedback. And another piece that I'll touch on briefly is, while it's on us as a leader to give feedback and give direction, once a quarter, I'll ask my direct reports, how am I doing? Am I giving you what you need? What do I need to reflect on as myself? What do you like that you're getting from me? Do you want to see more of? I think it's important to have that two-way street because I may be doing something that I think you may like as an employee of mine, and you're like, Artie, that sucks. Please stop doing that. And well, I think I'm giving you, what you want. In fact, I'm giving you the exact opposite. But because there's not that space there to have a conversation, guess what? It's not going to change. And so you got to be open to the feedback, check in with your folks, and you can't manage people the same way. You have to be able to adapt to your team and how they like to be led and collaborated with.
I think that's great, actually, a great point. Just personally, sometimes, like when I've interviewed potential future leaders, I cringe a tiny bit when we talk about leadership styles. And I feel like individuals tend to feel like I'm a transformational leader, I'm an authentic leader. And like, sure, like maybe to a degree you are. And I can appreciate and respect that. But I've always been on the side of the argument that a good leader is a chameleon. And that's
Hmm.
because, yes, there may be a leadership style that you settle into nicely that feels good for you. But to your point, it doesn't mean that translates well to every
Yeah,
direct report that you have. And so when I argue that I think a truly great leader is able to be more of a chameleon, meaning they can adapt and modify their style
you have
based
to.
off of the people that they're trying to inspire.
Absolutely. And if you have teams in different parts of the world, you have to be mindful of, again, the communication style, the culture, right? It's not for them to convert to me. To me, that's a bit selfish and short-sighted. It's up to me to be able to understand I'm in their world, I'm in their wheelhouse, so I need to be able to adapt to their culture of understanding. Otherwise, you're going to make it hard to get work done effectively.
With your experience, when you hear about an organization struggling with turnover, where do
Yeah.
you usually see the root cause issue?
This might be a bit critical, but I'm going to point first and foremost. I'm going to point to the leaders. And if I'm looking at attrition reporting on a monthly basis, and I see that some leaders are struggling more with
Mhm.
attrition, sometimes it can be the work. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes it's the roles. Some roles are high turnover. I respect that also. And you're within the averages of that role. That's to be expected. And in
Mhm.
cases where that's not so, we have to look at the leader and say, hey, what's missing? This is what I'm noticing, right? And my approach usually is that of support. I'm not on a hunt. I'm not here to accuse anyone.
Yeah.
because there could be some barriers that we just need help overcoming. So I'm going to look there. And then I always bring it back to people, process, and technology. You've got those three pillars that are going to help drive an organization. So if it's not a people issue, is it a process or a technology issue that we have to look at? That's typically where I start, is to say,
Mhm.
hey, leader, I'm noticing X in terms of your attrition. What's in the way of that? Because the time to backfill and cost is exhausting. And it's expensive, and it's a huge distraction from that leader's desk to meet their objectives. So they can't be having a good time. So I definitely want to dive into the data and figure out how I can support that effort. But that's usually where I start. And
Yeah.
again, it's not to accuse a leader of being a poor leader, it's to try to understand what the roadblocks are and how we can support that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. This just came to mind as you were talking. What is your personal opinion on exit interviews?
You know, there's value in them, yes. Of course, no one wants to burn a bridge, right? Unless they just have some animosity,
Yeah,
like
they
forget
light
this
them
company.
up.
Absolutely. There's value there because
Mhm.
when you look at the exit from a data perspective, right, you'll see why they're looking to exit. And then you can filter and you can get an idea because sometimes it's programs we need to reinvent. If it's more leader focused, then we have those conversations also. I say there's value in them, yes, right? It's going to be a data point
Mhm.
and an entree of decisions that we have to make. It's not going to drive a decision for me necessarily, but it's going to be a data point and that I'm going to consider while I'm, having to review a group
Yeah.
or a leader or a department on why attrition may be so high in a group.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I've always taken them with a grain of salt because it's like, on the one hand, you're like, okay, maybe they're being very transparent because they have nothing to
Right.
lose now. But then
Right.
I call them snipers. It's like, or are they just putting it all out there and they don't care? And this is built up over the last 10 years. And
Right.
you're like, well, but I would agree if you're seeing a trend in what's being said about a particular process or leader, then maybe you have a little more confidence. Okay, there's got to be some truth in here if 10 people said something very similar.
Absolutely.
And I suppose maybe that paired with the engagement surveys and that kind of feedback on top of the attrition retention metrics, maybe would create a more clear picture.
It has to. So it's a moment in time. I look at it that way. It's a data point, and you have to, unless it's something really egregious. But on the average, yes, you use it to collect, and it's going to tell you a story. That's kind of how I phrase it. The data over time will tell you a story. You need to be able to understand and read the story and interpret it correctly, and
Mhm.
not be afraid of what it's telling you. Right? Sometimes we kind of shy away from it because we don't want to see the truth behind it.
Yeah,
But then, as an HR professional, I can't effectively help support my teams if I run away from the data. So, as a manager, you got to just embrace it. And my point is, it's not a make wrong.
yeah.
It's not a hunt. It's to inform. It's to support. It's to
Mhm.
evolve. That's my approach with the leader in these types of conversations to help them be open to, hey, this is what we have to say. I get you've been leading for 20 years, but there's still opportunity to grow. Or on the other hand, hey, you've been doing this for 5 minutes. Let's look at the data. It's not a make wrong. It's just to expose, like to your earlier point, I don't know what you don't know. It's going to help us grow together
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So that's my approach to taking it. I find that I get higher collaboration, where people are even reaching out to say, hey, Artie, it's time. Can we look at the data? This is what I'm saying. Or
Yeah.
my engagement survey wasn't as high as I thought. What did I miss? And that makes me excited when I see that when they reach out to me versus me bugging them. Like, oh, it's Artie again talking about the survey. It's more like, hey, Artie, I want my results. I need to look at it. Can you help me interpret it? I get excited about that because I know there's an understanding to want to learn and grow, and they're open to the feedback, which I get kind of nerdy about and get excited about personally.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say this disclaimer. I've used engagement surveys a lot throughout my whole
Hmm.
career. And I understand, especially as leaders, sometimes people are nervous about that because it's
Right.
like, oh my God, now the group is rating me, right? Judging me, and you're not quite sure how it's going to land. And I always say, you're probably going to have one sniper. Out of the bunch,
Yes.
you got to go with what the norm is here on these
Right.
results. And I remember, and this was like, I was a pretty novice manager. We did something like that. And I literally had once, I know it was the same person. I think I know who it was. If it was you, and
They're
you know
anonymous
who,
now. They're
if it was you
anonymous.
and you know who you are, I know it was you. But they rated me a 1 on everything. Like
Oh.
it was like boom, 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 boom. And I was like, okay, I think we need to have a conversation.
You're You're gonna have the naysayers. You just are. And sometimes the leader is a brunt of it because they don't like what's going on. And that's gonna happen. But certainly, I mean, all you can do is I tell people like just lean into it, acknowledge it, own
Yeah,
it, and then right. And what it does is it for the sniper, as you said, it takes that power away from them because you're leaning into it at
yeah.
the end of the day, right?
Also,
But
look at the trend, right? If you have 50 people rating you a 5 on this question and one
right,
person rated you, well, that person hates you, okay? Like,
right,
you know, not everyone's
right.
going to love you. And that's,
I mean, it is, but like, why don't they love me, Bridget?
well, I'm like, why don't you come talk to, like, is there beef? Like, did I eat your
Right.
lunch out of the fridge and I didn't know? Like, what did I do to piss you off?
I remember the first time as a leader that was, I was being rated by my team, right?
Mhm.
I was so nervous. I literally was like sweating
Yeah,
when the results came out because like you try your best,
of
you have
course.
to make decisions. They're always going to be liked, right? That's the job. Overall, the team was like 15 and my direct report was 5. And so there was like about 5 or so who rated me lower, and I overanalyzed the data, and I
Mhm.
was like,
Yeah,
but why, right? And then again, it was just the naysayers, the snipers,
right.
brush it off, you lean into it, right? So anyway, I would just say as like a newer leader, kind of coming into their own, don't let that freak you out. Lean into the data, ask the questions, and the naysayers will get on board or they'll fall off, right? And either are okay.
Yeah, I often refer to it, at least in veterinary medicine, to break it down
Hmm.
for leaders at the local sites. It's like diagnostics. So
Yes.
it's but one component in the overall diagnosis of the patient, right? And so
Right.
you can't take that one piece, but rather, like we said, okay, sure, it's going to be the engagement survey, it's going to be the
Right.
attrition rates, it's going to be the reviews and what have you, and the exit
Absolutely.
interviews, all of it put together. And that's the picture of what you
Right.
want to treat. That's what you want to focus, not the
Absolutely.
one blip on the radar. That's what I
Focus on
tell
that.
myself when I'm crying myself to sleep over that one sniper from like 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, I'm gonna get that person on this. We're gonna talk about it. What do you
That would be entertaining for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Artie, sorry, I'm the one that took us off track, so let me get us
Yeah,
back on track.
sure, sure.
What is the biggest disconnect that you see between how leaders think employees feel versus how they actually feel?
Yeah, man, that's tough. I'm going to talk out two sides of my mouth here because sometimes employees are nervous to speak up, like if they don't feel safe or they feel, oh, it's work, I can't, right? That's too personal for me. Or sometimes leaves the leader guessing, and which is tough.
Sure.
And that's not for any leader, no matter if they're good or not good.
Yeah.
That makes it tough on the leader. Now, on the leader side, sometimes when they get into trouble is they tend to guess or maybe just assume, right? Things are going well or they're hitting their targets. And so you got to communicate early and often. You got to minimize the gray, minimize the assumption there.
Hmm.
Sometimes no news is not good news.
Yeah.
And so I would say sometimes that assumption can get them in a little bit of trouble. And then they kind of get blindsided and they're wondering, like, Artie, what happened here? I'm totally at a loss. Well, if you never hear from from an employee, that's when I'm like, you got to check in. You got to communicate early and often. Don't make that assumption that everything is hunky dory. That's where I go back to. You should be having one-on-ones anyway to talk about the business, but once a quarter, how am I doing?
Yeah.
Right? Show a little bit of vulnerability. Right? That goes a long way for people.
Hmm.
People I've seen many folks where I've had to get into some hot conversations with people and have to try to de-escalate and just showing a little bit of vulnerability and of course being authentic about it goes a long way and people just want to feel heard in that regard. So just don't assume because you haven't heard from someone that everything is okay. I
Yeah.
would encourage you to check in and be comfortable in that.
Sure. No, that's great advice.
Yeah.
All right. Last pivot on you. You've been a great sport, so thank
Well,
you
thank you.
for
You.
being so agile with me here as I'm
Yes.
like, all over the board.
Love it.
All right. I want to switch. I've done this with a couple guests and it was really fun. Kind of what I call just like rapid fire questions. So
Okay.
simple answers to get through a bunch. So I put together some fun ones, at least fun for me. We'll see. What is the biggest HR buzzword that you are tired of hearing?
Change management.
Oh,
2-second overview, right? It gets used interchangeably.
yeah,
That's why I say it, right?
yeah,
And so that's why I'm like, oh, I hear it so many times a day, but what you're saying really isn't change management. You're just kind of using the
yeah.
phrase of the day there. So that's why I say that.
I digress. I have to tell you, in one of my roles, myself and a bunch of my peers used to keep not quite a bingo card, but we would keep a list of like the keyword of the day because I
Right.
swear the executive team would all start saying the same word for like 2 or 3 weeks and then they would switch to another and it was very inappropriate. Don't do that.
Please don't,
No,
please.
don't do that. Okay, what is a common mistake new managers make?
You don't have to have all the answers. They think that they do,
Yeah.
and they feel the pressure to do that, right? What I tell people if I don't know, say, look, I don't want to give you bad information. Let me go research, and I will get
Mhm.
back to you. I'll appreciate you more for that. Because as a leader, no matter where you're at, people will hold on to your words like scripture. If you give them bad information and you take that and run with it, and it backfires, guess what? They're looking at you crazy, and then you've lost a little bit of credibility, right? So if you don't know, you don't know. Let them know you'll get back to them just as soon as you can.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great advice, actually. Okay, this one. Okay, professional here. What is one phrase that managers say that instantly makes HR nervous?
So something that I hear is like, oh, well, Artie, they're at will, so we can just fire them. I'm like, at will employment doesn't mean you can just fire people. That's not what that means. That's a big misconception. So yeah, I hear that sometimes. I'm like, yeah, no, you can't just say, well, it's an at will state, so I'm gonna fire them. And no, like, there's more to it than just that.
Yeah,
So that definitely makes my skin crawl when I hear that statement. Let me educate a little
yeah,
bit. And the way I turn it around is like, look, how would you feel if your leader came to you and just said, hey, you're at will, so hit the road, right? That'd be horrible.
yeah.
And so sometimes it puts it more in perspective, and I'm like, if that was you on the receiving end, yeah, that makes me a little nervous.
I'm not going to share the phrases that went through my mind, so
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
that I have heard other managers.
Right.
We won't go there. In your experience, what's one conversation that you feel like managers avoid the most?
You know, it's funny. Two things come to mind. If you're in an office setting, this is going to sound kind of silly, but like hygiene conversations
Yeah,
or the
yes,
right? I've had my fair share of
yeah.
conversations I've had to help coach managers through, and
Mhm.
because you don't know the situation of the employee, and
Yeah.
so there's that. But assuming you do, they're just being lazy. I'm like, hey, like we can't,
Mhm.
right? We did have this was way back when early in my career, we had an employee, and it was a tech company, and they were kind of a call center, so it was very much behind the scenes. So they
Mhm.
were allowed jeans, t-shirt. Well, we started coming to work in sweatpants, and then it turned into like there was an odor in the office and it was an open environment. And so
Mhm.
people were starting to complain. And the lady who led that group was like, hey, Artie, I really need your help with this.
Mhm.
And so I coached her through it. And then we ended up having a conversation together with the employee. Yeah, that was awkward. That team's always a tough one because
Yeah.
it's personal for that employee. But on the other side, right, sometimes leaders struggle talking about performance. And a common faux pas will be if there's a team of five and one's having a hard time, instead of addressing that individual, they address the entire team,
Yeah.
hoping that one will get the message. Well, your higher performers are like, what are you doing? Like,
Right.
why am I in this to begin with? Nothing to do with me. And
Right.
so, it end up kind of being a double blow because now the high performers like, why am I involved in this conversation when it's Johnny and not me, right? Type of deal. So you have to address it straight on, one on one, right? Set expectations, be clear, and then set a path forward.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head with that one. I do think because people are often uncomfortable with conflict or a difficult
Yes.
conversation, they're like, oh, I'll address it to the group. But I promise you, the one that you want to hear it isn't even listening,
Oh,
right?
you must be talking
They're
about someone
not thinking it applies to them. And then, like, you're pissing off your high performers because they're like, where is this coming from? This makes no sense.
Absolutely. And if I could just drive that a little bit more, is the difficult conversation. Whatever that it is, you can't avoid it because it's like moldy cheese. It'll stink and it'll get
Yeah.
worse and it'll compound over time. And then you're calling me 3 months later looking for help, and I'm like, well, you let this cheese get moldy, right? So how do
Right.
we clean it up? You got to lean into it. I tell people prepare for the conversation, set the context. Keep it about the facts. Don't make it personal. Engage the employee on possible solutions and then set a path forward. Even for myself, doing this as long as I have, I still, before a hard conversation, I take some notes. Where I want this conversation to go, what pitfalls I want to avoid, how do I want to get there, what's the end result? And sometimes I'll tell somebody, I'll start with the end in mind. This is where I like to get to.
Yeah.
How do we get there together? Right? So that's a great point you bring up is those hard conversations. Sometimes people will stray away from because it's uncomfortable. Well, I get it, but that's part of the job. And I'll tell someone, reach out for support. I will role play with you, right? We will sit down, we will talk about what's going on. I'm happy to share my point of view on it. But the leader is the leader. Drinking my own Kool-Aid, right? You have to lean in and have those hard conversations when necessary.
Yeah. What is the fastest way a manager can lose trust with their team?
Yeah. When you insult their intelligence, to be quite honest, you got to be transparent. Now, again, sometimes some things just can't be said, and I understand that. But generally speaking, normal course of business, you just need to be transparent with your employees where you can. Engage them in the decision making. Now, sometimes decisions are just brought down, and we have to enact them, and that's going to happen. But where you can engage, please do. It's critical. And if you just choose not to, you would lose trust rather quickly with your team.
Yeah. Artie, I do appreciate you playing along with my rapid
Yes, this has
fire
been
questions.
fun.
It was fun. You are always a joy to talk to, and you just
Oh,
have so much information that I think is truly valuable to leaders in all phases of their career. So novice leaders to even seasoned leaders, kind of taking us out here. What
yeah.
advice would you give a leader that's listening today? What's a takeaway you want them to have from our convo?
Absolutely. I could talk all day on that. Let me be mindful and take a few minutes to say, if you're new, surround yourself around the right people, first and foremost. As you build your brand, you're going to pull from different people. Engage in a sponsor. I mean, like a mentor or sponsor. What you can learn from that person, you learn from that person. Sometimes we'll have multiple. Right, because you want to learn different acumens of the business. That's okay. At the end of the day, you want to pull from all the leaders you want to be, in your circle to form your own brand. Right? Don't try to be like someone else because you won't be.
Yeah.
Right? You want to be yourself. That's important. Even from the more challenging leaders, there's still nuggets of information you can pull from the noise. Because I've had some challenging leaders, certainly, and even then, I'm able to find nuggets of information that have helped me evolve. So don't just tune them out because you disagree, or maybe they're not the best leader for you. There's still nuggets to learn from, right? As you develop that, you'll come into your own. Don't be afraid to make the mistakes. Don't be afraid to say you don't know, and plan out what your career looks like. I think that was really important. Someone sat down with me and said, "Hey, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years?" I don't mean in terms of climbing up a ladder. I mean in terms of growth. When the growth comes organically, right, the ladder will come naturally. So people tend to focus more on the ladder versus the organic growth. It gets them into trouble because sometimes they move a little too quickly.
Yeah.
And then their trust is lost, and that's hard to get back. So focus on your organic growth, and then the ladder will come on its own, right? And people will respect you for it. They're going to want to be around you for it, and they're going to gravitate towards you. And the last thing I'll say for an experienced leader, give back. I've had people pour into me over my career, and I've been so fortunate and so blessed to have that happen to me that I look for opportunities to give back to people. I think that is so important as we build our next level of leaders. We want to make sure that we leave it in good hands, or better than we found it. Okay.
Yeah, great advice. Artie, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your time today. It was fun.
So much fun. Thank you so much for having me, Bridget.
Of course.